Chapter 739, Don't Act Weak in Front of Me. We came specifically to see you. There's no need to notify Zihao. Chen Xinyan looked down at the smashed phone on the floor and then looked up at the two domineering elders in front of her. She was so angry that her hands began to tremble. Father Yun could sense that Chen Xinyan was on the brink of releasing her anger, so he quickly pulled Mother Yun behind him to protect her. He then said to Chen Xinyan, "If you're angry, then direct your anger towards me. Don't you dare lay a hand on my wife." To be honest, it's not that we won't allow Zihao to get married, you are simply not good enough for our son-in-law. TSK. What a couple of bold and confident parents. Chen Xinyan's eyes turned red. She was so angry that tears began to gather in her eyes. However, words that Tang Ning had previously said to her, suddenly came to mind. If she didn't want to be bullied, she should not hold back even if she had to fight until the world was flipped upside down. So, she shoved the old man and said, "Don't think that I'd respect you and hold back. You're not deserving of respect to begin with. Don't try to scare me off by saying that I'm not good enough. Let me tell you, I am Mo Ting's sister. When it comes to family background, your Yunzhen isn't worthy of even carrying my shoes. Also, don't pretend to faint or act weak in front of me. If you dare to that, I will immediately jump down from the third floor and tell the police that you forced me to commit suicide." Father Yun froze and Mother Yun's eyes grew big as she stared at Chen Xinyan. They had never experienced a situation like this, nor had they ever met anyone that was more ruthless than themselves. Chen Xinyan used the right amount of power and appeared ready to give up anything. This was, of course, enough to stun the two elders. Especially Mother Yuna broken bar. Her original plan to faint suddenly became useless. All she could do was stutter angrily as she repetitively spurted the same word. You, did you say that I was shameless?" Chen Xinyan was finally in control of the situation. She then sneered at the elders, "Although these words don't sound very nice, when it comes to being shameless, I am still miles behind the two of you. And Zihao and I are an official couple. I am his girlfriend. I have an identity. What relationship do you have with him? You are neither relative nor friend. He simply took care of you over the years because of his moral principles. Yet, you have the audacity to come to his home and force him to break up with his girlfriend. You are like how the farmer and the snake one, returning kindness with ingratitude." Yun, don't tell me that he was the cause of Yunzhen's death. You know better than anyone how she died. If someone else was in your position, they would already be thankful that they still have money to put food on the table. You are already in a good position. Do you think you're in Zihao's birth parents? Old man, I can't take it anymore. My head is spinning, Mother Yun said as she held onto her head and began to sway after hearing Chen Xinyan's words. At this time, Chen Xinyan displayed her shameless nature by walking over to the window and throwing it open. "If you dare to put on an act, I will immediately jump out this window. There are so many people outside to act as witnesses. Let's see how you talk yourselves out of it. I'm a celebrity after all and I draw a high degree of attention. If anything happens, let's see if my brother will let the two of you go." Seeing that Chen Xinyan was serious, Father Yun no longer dared to provoke her. So, he immediately carried the old lady on his back and left Zihao's home to head straight for the hospital. Chen Xinyan was aware that Mother Yun was honestly feeling unwell towards the end, but she couldn't buckle at the last minute and show any weakness, so she forced herself to stand beside the window. She refused to believe that the elders could be any more shameless. And, as expected, she forced them to retreat. But, as she looked at the empty living room, she suddenly felt exhausted. So, she gave Tang Ning a phone call. "Ningji, can I come stay at Hyatt Regency for a few days? I want to keep my nephew's company." Hearing her tone of voice, Tang Ning could tell that she had experienced some form of suffering, so she replied, "If Andy wants to come, do you think I could stop her?" Chen Xinyan found a good place to go, so she immediately called for a taxi and headed to Hyatt Regency. Tang Ning couldn't wait to hear Chen Xinyan's story, but, after arriving, Chen Xinyan did not say a word. Instead, she pounced into Tang Ning's arms and burst into tears. Afterwards, she went to play with the two kids like nothing had happened. After all, it wasn't like her and Zihao were going to break up. So, it wasn't right for her to tell others about his private matters. Even though it was Tang Ning, she still did not think it was right. As Tangning looked at Chen Xinyan, she realized she had matured quite a fair bit. At least, she now knew how to weigh the pros and cons before doing something. In reality, it wasn't actually the anniversary of Yunzin's death. Father Yun had brought Mother Yun to Enzihao's home because he knew Enzihao had a late meeting from a phone call he made a few days earlier. But now, not only had he not shooed Chen Xinyan away, he even worsened his wife's condition. He was like a chicken thief that not only failed to steal a chicken but ended up wasting a bag of grains. So, he was so angry, he decided to give Enzihao a phone call. "Zihao, come to the hospital for a bit. Your auntie might not be able to make it." Enzihao was in the middle of a meeting. After receiving the phone call and gaining the understanding of Director Chen Feng, he immediately left. But, after arriving anxiously at the hospital, he simply found the two elders sitting inside the hospital chatting to each other. This was no urgent situation. Enzihao took a deep breath. After calming himself down, he asked, "What's wrong with Auntie?" "Zihao, you came at the right time. Your auntie and I visited your home today with good intentions, but that little girlfriend of yours called us shameless and said that we were like the farmer and the snake. She even made your auntie so angry that she fainted." "She's not like that," Enzihao responded. "Zihao, after all these years, do you choose to trust a woman that you've dated for a short time over your uncle? You've really disappointed me." "Uncle, take care of Auntie for now. I'll go home to check." Enzihao turned around to leave, but got called back. "Zihao, please, Uncle. Do you know how important my meeting was tonight? Stop assuming that the entire world revolves around the two of you. I was honestly worried about Auntie, but you ended up lying to me." After speaking, Enzihao left without turning back and hurried home. However, when he returned to his apartment, none of the lights were on and Chen Xinyan wasn't home. But, he knew she didn't have any work tonight. He then glanced down at the mess on the floor and Chen Xinyan's smashed phone. His heart felt like it had been crushed, causing unbearable pain. "She doesn't have many places she can go," Enzihao mumbled to himself before he gave Tangning a phone call. "Xinyan's at your place, isn't she?" After crying for a bit she fell asleep. Tangning replied honestly, "Sorry, you shouldn't be saying sorry to me. How did you upset her? You need to show how you feel, that's what women want. Stop saying there's nothing going on between the two of you. No one believes you." Chapter 740, Cut off any future troubles. Understood, Enzihao mumbled. To be exact, he not only understood, his mind was also clear. What Chen Xinyan meant to him and the position she held in his heart was clearer than ice. He was well aware that Yunzin was already in the past. So, he wasn't going to let two unrelated people torment his girlfriend. Therefore, regardless of how late at night it was, Enzihao went in search of a mobile phone store that was still open, helped Chen Xinyan order a new SIM card and delivered it straight to her. However, he requested for Tangning not to wake Chen Xinyan up. Tangning received the phone and shook her head, but still helped her friend with this favor. It was best for her not to get involved with others' relationships, even though she only meant the best. Plus, she understood that not everyone was like Moting, who ensured her safety no matter how ruthless he was. However, she believed that Enzihao had already tried his best. "I'll only allow you to upset Xinyan this once. Never again." "Don't worry." Enzihao appeared determined. As he left, his gaze was firm. However, he was going to spend the entire night in deep thought, because he was afraid that Chen Xinyan would give up and he was also afraid that he'd make the wrong decision. But, if some steps in life weren't taken, there would never be a result. If that was the case, then there would be no end to the pain experienced by Chen Xinyan. He was never going to let that happen. Actually, that night, Chen Xinyan was also tormenting herself. Ever since they became a couple, their days passed in sweetness. Conflicts like the one today were rarely a broken bar. But, one conflict was enough to pierce straight into the depths of her heart. It was not a good feeling. So, after crying for half the night, Chen Xinyan finally fell asleep. Of course, as a master of training people, Tangning knew that Chen Xinyan wasn't going to get much sleep in the first half of the night, so she did not give her the phone yet. It was not until she woke up to feed the babies at dawn did she casually place the phone onto Chen Xinyan's bedside table. Seeing her in deep sleep, Tangning shook her head. The poor thing cried so much, her eyes were swollen like walnuts. But, This was a normal reaction from the woman, and Tangning was aware that love could help a person mature quickly. Hence, even though Tangning's heart ached a little, she did not intervene. Soon, the sun fully rose. Chen Xinyan sat up drowsily from her bed and noticed a phone sitting on the bedside table that looked exactly the same as the one she had. That's right, it was exactly the same. Chen Xinyan rushed out of the room with a head of messy hair. Seeing Tangning preparing breakfast, she asked, "Ningji, where did this phone come from?" Someone delivered it last night," Tangning replied casually. "Did he leave without saying anything?" "He told me not to disturb your sleep and to let you get some proper rest," Tangning said before she walked out of the kitchen with Mo Ting's breakfast. But, Chen Xinyan's heart raced faster and faster, like the beat of a drum. Last night, she was overcome by complex emotions, but today, because of one simple action by Nzihao, all her problems disappeared. Love, a thing without reason, something that had no rules nor explanations. "Are you sure that you want to attend the studio with that face of yours? Your assistant has been waiting for you." Tangning returned to the kitchen a moment later and pointed to the guest sitting in the living room. Chen Xinyan turned and looked at Little Seven before she quickly returned to her room and tidied herself up. She then approached Little Seven and said, "Let's go." "You're not having breakfast?" Tangning asked as she crossed her arms. "Nope. How could she possibly have the appetite?" However, Nzihao knew that she had a habit of skipping breakfast, so he instructed Little Seven to bring her food. But, Little Seven waited until they boarded the van before she handed it to her. "Mister, and bought this for you." As she looked at the breakfast, Chen Xinyan's eyes suddenly turned red. She had run away so recklessly last night when the incident wasn't even Nzihao's fault. Over the course of one night, she had thought a lot. She relied on Nzihao too much. If one day, he was to leave, would she struggle to even stand up? "Miss Chen, would you like to return home first, or head to the studio?" "Let's go straight to the studio," Chen Xinyan replied. Nzihao had done so much for her, hoping that she'd improve and grow. So, she couldn't disappoint him. Little Seven was a little surprised, but she still obeyed Chen Xinyan's orders and drove straight to the studio. Chen Xinyan did not contact Nzihao straight away because she still needed time to reflect on herself. Of course, Nzihao was in no rush to contact her either. After all, he knew every activity she had scheduled and knew exactly where she was. In order to give her a surprise that night, he did not call to check on her status, nor did he remind her to behave. After an entire day of work, Chen Xinyan put in more effort than ever before. As she left, she glanced at her watch. It was already 9 p.m. "Should I take you home?" Little Seven suggested. Chen Xinyan was fairly tired, so she nodded her head. It was time to face the inevitable. There were plenty of things that she wanted to say to Nzihao. Soon, the van arrived outside Nzihao's apartment. Chen Xinyan bid Little Seven farewell and headed up to the apartment by herself. She originally thought that Nzihao wasn't home yet, but, to her surprise, Nzihao was sitting in the living room with Mother Yan and Father Yan. The scene in front of her was both ridiculous, yet harmonious. It was almost like they were a family and she was just an outsider. With this thought, Chen Xinyan wanted to turn and leave. But, Nzihao directly said to her, "Come here." Chen Xinyan was a little stunned. But, under Nzihao's soothing gaze, she ended up walking obediently to his side and sat down. Father Yan and Mother Yan did not look pleased as they immediately asked, "What is the meaning of this? Did you call us over to show off your affection? Back when you were dating Yunzin, you promised that you'd never fall for another person." "Auntie, you need to have a basis to your words," Nzihao refuted. "Yunzin's not around anymore." "Of course you're going to deny it. For me, if I've said something then I'll admit to it. If not, then I'm not going to pretend that I did." "I'm sure my girlfriend believes me," Nzihao said before he looked at Chen Xinyan. "Isn't that right?" Chen Xinyan nodded firmly. "See, that's enough. Stop going around in circles. Be honest, what did you call us here for?"
Hit the like, thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for listening.